Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Digital Revolution podcast. This week's episode is going to be just a little bit different than our normal content, where I sit face to face and interview somebody about a specific topic in the digital world. So we just hit 65 episodes as of last week. Last week's podcast was the 65th episode in the Digital Revolution podcast. And I think we've come a long way, and I think it's worth celebrating some of those wins. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about some of the stats that we've had so far over the last almost 13 months now. We launched our first podcast January 29th of last year, of 2024. And I think it's worth talking about some of the series that we went through, some of the maybe even struggles that we went through, some of the wins that we had, talking about some of the highlights, and really kind of just going over some of the stats. I also want to talk about where the podcast is going. And yeah, so it's just, either way, it's just going to be a little bit different. So hang in there with me. It won't be as long as any of the other podcasts that we've done. So if you can hang on till the end, I think that hopefully you'll enjoy this podcast just as much as the other ones, even though this one is not specifically catered towards education. So when I first started the Digital Revolution podcast, I really wanted to create an atmosphere where business owners and up-and-coming digital marketers could come and learn from other experts, right? So I had originally thought, hey, maybe I'll just get on a podcast and I'll just talk to the camera and I'll just teach people everything that I've learned over the last 20 years. And then I started to think that, as fun as that would be for me, I'm being facetious, that wouldn't have been fun for me. I thought, there are a lot of people who know a lot more than me. And not just that, but they have a lot more experience in specific areas. I can talk SEO all day long, right? I can talk leadership all day long. I can talk about managing digital marketing all day long. But when it comes to the specifics in how to do certain things like email marketing or SMS, other things that maybe I've managed in the past, I probably didn't have the experience to teach you as a business owner, up and coming marketer, or even somebody who's been in the field for quite some time at the level that I wanted you to learn. So I decided to bring on guests, and I really wanted to make it a global podcast. A lot of people just kind of stick within their state and their current network, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Even sticking within the United States, there's nothing wrong with that as well. But because I had been the previous, 8 years at a company where I had managed global marketing, it really opened my eyes to see how people do it differently in other countries. Google is in most countries, but they're not the only dominating browser in some of these other countries, like in Asia and in Russia and, all these other countries. They have different browsers. Maybe they do use Google. Maybe they use Google with other browsers as well. And so I wanted to bring in experts who had either lived in these other countries or worked in these other countries in some of these other, specific topics as well. And I think we've been able to do that. We have been just to kind of give you some stats, I'm just going to look here in my notes, just to give you some stats. We have been listened to in 50 different countries in over 400 different cities. We've touched topics like SEO, PPC, email and SMS marketing, AI, digital product management, influencer marketing, social media marketing, content marketing, digital marketing tools, how to get hired in digital marketing myths, and so much more. We've had guests from all over the world. We've had guests from London and all of the surrounding areas, from Amsterdam to Pakistan and Israel and Hong Kong and all over the United States as well. We've had people who speak multiple different languages, people who have different accents than I have, people who own their own agencies, people who own their own e-commerce websites, people who own their own SaaS product or tool. And we've had some amazing guests, some amazing guests. And I think having that diverse group of people on the podcast, both male and female, we've been able to tackle scenarios and go over things that we might not have done. I'll just say this, we for sure would not have done it if it were just me, right? And we might not have done it if I would have just stayed within my little local network here in Utah. And there's a lot of experts in Utah. There's a ton of amazing people in Utah, and I still want to get all of them on the podcast, but I wanted to expand it beyond that. I wanted to go global, right? And I think that has helped with some of the stats that we've had, because we've had people in Pakistan and in London. The stats show that we have had, lots of different countries and lots of different cities and lots of different language types. They still come and they listen in English, because that's all we offer at this point, but it would be nice eventually to expand beyond that. So either way, I'm so grateful for everybody who has been a part of the podcast. I've learned so much from them. I've learned so much about podcasting. When I first started, I was reaching out to people and saying, I don't know what I'm doing. What tools do I use? How do I do the setup? If you go and look at my first podcast compared to this podcast, even my background looks different if you're watching it on YouTube. But I've gone through, do I put just audio on Spotify? Do I do video on Spotify? How do I focus on YouTube and grow that channel as well as all of the other channels? Do I try to get reviews and ratings on all of them? And if so, which one matters the most? I've had to go through this learning experience and I still feel like I don't know that much. I still feel like I'm pretty novice to this. And I'm taking Mr. Beast's advice where I heard him on a podcast last year say that you need to upload 100 videos to YouTube before you even look back and change strategy. Just set a goal, put 100 on there, because within the 100, and I'm not just doing this on YouTube, I'm learning as a podcast. I'm going to do 100 podcast episodes. And over time, I learn how to edit better. I learn how to speak better. I learn how to take notes better. I learn how to listen, active listening while I'm talking to people so that I can ask better questions and be a better interviewer, right? I'm looking for opportunities to take, the products that my guests have and turn that into somewhat of a discount code for my listeners. And we've been able to do that with a few episodes. I know coming up here in the future, we're going to have a few more of those as well, where there's some really cool softwares that can help in digital marketing. And we're going to have a discount code where if you want to use that software or test it out, you can use that discount code and get a little bit of a discount. So either way, I wanted to get on today and really share my gratitude for all of you listeners and all of you guests. I've officially put all of the episodes on IMDb, so you're welcome to go there and you can click, you can find, all of the guests who have been on there. You can go to each individual guest, each individual episode, and there's links to YouTube, and there's links to Spotify, and there's links to Apple Podcasts and stuff. If you want to look on IMDb, you're welcome to go to Buzzsprout. You go to Fire Us Marketing /podcast, and you can see everything. You can see all of the audio, all of the video. You can go to that landing page on Fire Us Marketing. You can see I've separated it into groups as well. So there's the overall podcasts where you can go and you can actually see every single podcast that we've done has its own blog post. So you can get a high level if you want written. If there's links out to their LinkedIn page or to their products that they're talking about, their companies, it's all on fireusmarketing.com. So also what I want to do, speaking of fireusmarketing.com, I will create a link on fireusmarketing.com and put it in the show notes here. I would love to know where you want to see the podcast go in the future. I have my ideas. I'm not planning on quitting. I have lots of new episodes and lots of new guests already scheduled out. But last year we focused on SEO a lot. We had an SEO series. We had a 30-part SEO series talking about just SEO and every single aspect of SEO. In the beginning of the year, we had Women in Digital. It was a series where I think we had 13 to 15 women that were specific in digital. And they talked not only about their skills in digital and what they were doing and what they wanted to do long term, but also how to do that as a single mother, how to do it as a married person, how to do it as a person who's never been married or never had kids, every variation. And there were people who were just starting, and there were people who were, CMOs. There were people who were owners of companies, and they have their own unique perspective on what it means to be a woman in the digital space, some of the struggles that they've gone through in the beginning and how they overcame those struggles. And so I wanted to do that one specifically because I have 3 daughters, and I want them to eventually, they're a little bit young now, but eventually I want them to listen to the podcast, and I want them to see that it doesn't matter which direction you want to go or what the culture says, that it's possible to do whatever you want to do. If you want to own a company, you can do it. It doesn't matter if you're married, if you're single, if you're divorced, if you're a single mom, it doesn't matter. You can still do it. And a lot of people, they talked about phases where, sometimes I ran my own company. Sometimes I stayed home to help my kids. And sometimes I was an employee, and that's okay. You don't need to judge yourself and be so hard on yourself if you ebb and flow and where you want to go and whatever direction you want to go. So I really liked that series. So I want to leave a survey, and I'll put it on fireusmarketing.com/podcast survey. And if you go there, I'll also leave that link in the show notes. I want you to take that survey. I want to know what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, what ideas you have for future shows. Are there specific topics that you'd like me to cover that I haven't already covered, or that you want a part 2 in, or you loved a specific guest that you want them to come back and speak more about what they're talking about? I would love to know what direction you, as the listener, want me to take this podcast. Do we continue international? Do we focus on one specific area? Do we turn it into maybe different languages, or whatever would be the most helpful for you? Back to kind of the beginning, the original idea of this podcast is so that business owners and up and coming marketers, as well as people who've been in the field for a long time, they can come to this podcast and they can listen to the story of the person who is going to be doing the educating towards the end of the podcast, but like where they came from, what they want to be when they were little, what struggles did they have. It really humanizes them and makes you think, well, if they can do it, I can do it, right? And then if you want to skip all the way to the third section where we talk about it's sort of the Q&A section where I ask a bunch of questions on what specific topic they're teaching about that day. But if you just want to go right to that section and learn from them, just go onto the blog, go onto YouTube, whatever, and do a search for it, find that specific topic and learn about it. They have so many amazing ideas and different perspectives that, we were able to do 30 parts just around SEO. And you'd think a lot of SEO people would probably think like there's probably not that much you can talk about. But the more we dove into it, the more I think I probably could have gone 50 parts in SEO, but it took up a couple of months just talking about SEO. And so this year we will still have some SEO guests, but I probably won't focus on one specific thing as much like I did SEO. But anyway, so I want to hear from you. If you've loved the podcast and if you're still listening at this point, thank you so much for being kind and listening to the full podcast. I know that there are people around the world who are super busy and don't have a lot of time to listen just because you're working, you're, parents, you're whatever stage you are. I know that there are other distractions and other things that are more important than me. So if you're still listening up to this point, thank you so much. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for listening to me go on and talk about the Digital Revolution podcast. I'm so excited about 2025. Like I said, we're at 65. This will be 66. And the amount of awesome people, I have some business owners, I have some CMOs, I have some people who speaking of IMDb, they have been in movies. They have done some pretty cool things. So if you look them up on IMDb, you will see that they've done some pretty awesome things in their past, and they plan to do more amazing things in their future. So I look forward to having more amazing guests. If you are somebody listening to this and you'd like to be a guest, again, go to the Digital Revolution podcast landing page on it's just fireusmarketing.com/podcast. And there is a link to apply to be on the podcast. And, we can jump on a quick 15-minute call, talk about your skill set, talk about your history. And if it makes sense to have you on the podcast, I would love to have you on the podcast. Anyway, again, thank you so much for your time today. This is just a quick podcast, but thanks so much for the support up until this point. If you haven't listened to them all the way from the beginning, go listen to them from the beginning. Just listen to them when you're at the gym or whatever. If you have listened to them from the beginning and you're still sticking around listening, again, thank you so much. And with that being said, we will talk to you guys next week.